Yolanda Wington was only 17 years old when she took a job working as a nanny for a family in Beanham, a small village just 6 miles east of Newbury, Berkshire. Peter and Rosemary Jagger had previously employed short-term au pairs to help care for their 18-month-old daughter. They were delighted to hire a local young woman who might stay with their baby as she grew older. Yolanda was keen to leave her job as a petrol station attendant in Newbury, but she was also glad she could remain close to her parents, 2 younger brothers, and her boyfriend, who all lived nearby. She began her new position on October 23, 1966, and was immediately impressed with her new surroundings. The Jaggers lived in a charming old farmhouse called Oakwood on the edge of Beanham. Rosemary and Peter allowed Yolanda a great deal of freedom, and she told a friend that she was permitted to stay out until 2 a.m., something she had never been allowed under her parents' roof. The little girl she cared for was cheerful and affectionate, and the Jaggers were pleased with their new nanny. Yolanda came from a respectable family, was well-mannered, friendly, and at the same time unafraid to assert herself. Rosemary noticed that Yolanda learned quickly, and she enjoyed taking evening walks. After her 4th day working for the family, Yolanda told them she planned to walk a few miles along the farm road. Rosemary was concerned because it was already dark and the farm was isolated, and she insisted Yolanda take Elizabeth Rash, the German au pair who was leaving soon. The 2 young women walked down the winding roads into town, stopping at the 6 Bells pub, where they spent some time before returning to Oakwood Farm. On Thursday, Yolanda visited her family in Newbury, telling them how much she loved her new job. The next day, October 28th, Elizabeth Rash left, and Yolanda spent her morning writing a letter to her boyfriend. That evening, just before 10 p.m., she asked the Jaggers if she could post her letter. Rosemary was hesitant, but as the pub closed at 11 p.m., she agreed, reminding Yolanda to return directly afterward. The Jaggers also gave her a key to unlock the French windows when she got back. Yolanda arrived at the 6 Bells around 1:35 p.m., noticed by several locals who were still curious about the newcomer. She posted her letter, bought a packet of cigarettes, and sat quietly at a table smoking alone. Soon after, she left without talking to anyone else in the pub. The next morning, Saturday, October 29th, Rosemary woke to find Yolanda's bed had not been slept in. She hoped Yolanda had spent the night with a friend, but when the young woman did not return by midday, Rosemary called the police to report her missing. On Sunday morning, some farm workers at Hall Place Farm, coincidentally owned by Peter Jagger's father, discovered blood-stained clothing among hay bales in a cow shed. Peter Jagger rushed to the neighboring property and immediately recognized the blue jeans and sweater Yolanda had been wearing Friday night. The men searched the barn and surrounding fields and eventually found Yolanda's body in a ditch. She was undressed, with her sweater knotted around her face. She had 2 superficial stab wounds, but the cause of death was strangulation using coconut fiber baling twine, the same type used to bind her wrists. The brutal killing shocked the tiny village of Beanham, where such violence had been almost unheard of. The only murder anyone could recall was when a barmaid was killed by soldiers during the Civil War in 1642. Local police, with officers from Scotland Yard, launched an investigation, but the scene provided few clues. Plaster casts were taken of tire tracks near the barn, and the 60 tons of hay stored in the cow shed were searched for evidence. Airmen from Greenham Common used mine detectors to look for the knife used in the attack, thought to be a kitchen knife. Everyone at the 6 Bells that night was questioned thoroughly. Investigators recovered a pack of cigarettes, a knife blade, an earring, some loose change, and the keys to the Jaggers' French windows from the barn and surrounding area. They confirmed Yolanda was last seen at the pub around 30 p.m., having spoken only to the publican to buy her cigarettes. Investigators concluded she was likely killed between 30 p.m. and midnight and suspected that more than one person might have been involved. The blood on the clothing in the barn came from Yolanda and an unknown person, suggesting a struggle before her death. Elizabeth Rash and another former au pair, Sonia, were questioned. Both denied seeing any strangers near Oakwood Farm. Sonia did report several inappropriate encounters with Peter Jagger, including one where he was found on her bed, and another when he attempted to remove her top. but there was no evidence he had left the house the night Yolanda was murdered or behaved similarly toward her in the days prior. Scotland Yard believed the killer was local and familiar with the dark, winding roads between Oakwood Farm and the village. The barn where Yolanda's clothes were found was reportedly a popular spot for local teenagers to roll in hay, but residents were convinced the murderer was not from their small community. Many believed a drifter or hitchhiker was responsible. So eager to clear suspicion from their village, over 200 local men voluntarily gave blood samples in November, one of the earliest mass blood tests in UK history. No match was found to the blood on Yolanda's clothing. By April 1967, the inquest concluded. Beenham residents were unsettled but reassured themselves the killer was likely a passing madman no longer near their village. Just days after the investigation closed, however, 2 more murders struck the town on April 17, 1967. 9-year-old friends Jeanette Wigmore and Jacqueline Williams went up Webb's Lane to retrieve Jeanette's bicycle to ride together to the gravel pits. They were classmates at the village primary school and often played together, sometimes joined by Jacqueline's younger sister. Just after 5 p.m., Jeanette's father, Tony, saw the girls playing in a nearby field. Around 5:30, a schoolmate spotted them wheeling their bikes toward the gravel pits. Blake's gravel pit had been unused for over a year, but was now a play area for children, complete with a tin shack, dirt mounds, and shallow ponds where the girls liked to collect frog spawn. The midge gravel pits across the road were still open, but the workers paid little attention to the kids. When Jeanette had not returned by 5 p.m., Tony became worried and drove around looking for her. He checked the Williams house and remembered Jeanette had mentioned frog spawn at Blake's pit. As darkness fell, Tony parked on the access road and walked toward the pit. He found the girls' bicycles and then discovered Jeanette lying face down in a shallow pool of water. Shocked and struggling to comprehend what had happened, he moved her body to the grass and ran for help. Teddy Williams, Jacqueline's father, grew concerned and set out to search as well. He soon found Jacqueline's body. He ran to the Stocks pub and told the patrons one girl was dead and the other missing. The police arrived quickly, cordoning off the area and lighting it with searchlights. Around 11 p.m., an officer wading through a pool filled with leaves and debris felt something solid beneath the water, Jacqueline's body. Autopsies revealed Jeanette had been stabbed 5 times, and Jacqueline had been strangled until unconscious and then drowned in a shallow pool. Evidence suggested Jacqueline had been sexually assaulted before her death. Investigators believed the killer then murdered Jeanette after realizing she had witnessed the crime. This time, the villagers could not distance themselves from the horror. Yolanda had been a newcomer, a stranger, making it easier to dismiss her death. But Jeanette and Jacqueline were local children, well known and loved. The people of Beenham realized a killer had already claimed 3 lives and could strike again at any moment. A detailed questionnaire was sent to each resident to establish their whereabouts between 5:30 and 6:30 p.m. on April 17. Every part of the gravel pit was searched, and all vegetation cut back to find the murder weapon, leaving no stone unturned. By the time they had finished processing the crime scene, it looked like a desolate moonscape. On April 20th, a blue coat and a pair of trousers, both stained with mud, were discovered by a journalist walking through the woods near the scene. The following day, the find was the talk of the 6 Bells, where journalists mingled with locals to discuss the shocking events. One reporter spoke to a man who worked at the gravel pits across from where the bodies were found. He said that 4 policemen had visited his home to question him. He also mentioned that he had been interviewed previously by the police after the Yolanda Wington murder because he had reported losing a knife similar to the one used in the attack. That man was David Burgess, a 19-year-old living with his parents and 2 younger brothers in a council house on the Stonyfield estate in Beenham. David was a local through and through, born and raised in the village. He had been an average student and left school at 15 to work on a farm. He had a small circle of friends and went on dates but had never had a serious relationship. His main interest was poaching, and he was particularly skilled at catching rabbits. David took a job at the gravel pits with his older brother, John, and was a familiar face at the 6 Bells pub. One of his most notable features was a glass eye, a result of an air rifle accident when he was a child. 2 days after the murder, police questioned David as part of their routine investigation, since he had been working near the pit where the bodies were found. He told them he had briefly left the pit around 6 o'clock to check some rabbit snares he had set up in a small group of trees by the pit. When asked if he owned a sharp, pointed tool, he showed them a broken metal pocket knife. His statement did not raise any concerns, so the police moved on to other leads. A few days later, Burgess ran into the officers in Reading and casually shared a point with them before asking for a lift home, feeling relaxed after his first conversation. He mentioned it was strange that he had been near the recent murders and had also been drinking at the Six Bells the night Yolanda Wington was killed. He had voluntarily given a blood sample and was eliminated as a suspect along with many others present at the pub that evening. But he also told the officers that Jacqueline's father thought the killer was likely a poacher and even showed off a new hunting knife he had bought. This information raised some suspicions. A few days later, the police asked Burgess to hand over the clothes he had been wearing on the day of the murder. On May 7th, David Burgess was called in for another interview. This time the mood was serious, and there was no casual conversation. The detectives presented the work boots he had given them and showed him the test results. A blood stain on the side of the boots matched the very rare blood type of Jeanette Wigmore. David broke down and told the investigators that he had heard a scream and rushed to Blake Pit, where he saw a man standing by Janet's body. He claimed the man ran off, and he approached the girl, touched her, but fled when he realized she was dead. His story did not explain all the other test results. Human blood had been found on his jeans along with a semen stain. Combined with testimony from his brother, who said David had left the gravel pit for 10 to 20 minutes during the time of the murder, the evidence convinced a jury to convict him of both killings. David Burgess was sentenced to 2 life terms in prison. In 2010, Yolanda Wington's case was reopened 44 years after her death. Using modern DNA technology, evidence from the original scene was re-examined. Burgess's DNA was found on Yolanda's headband, a comb, and a fertilizer sack from the cow shed. At a 2012 trial, Burgess was convicted of the 1966 crime, and the 64-year-old was sentenced to an additional 27 years in prison. We now know that on October 20, 1966, David Burgess was drinking at the Six Bells when Yolanda Wington went in to post a letter and buy cigarettes. He watched her leave, slipped away shortly after, and caught up with her on the road to Oakwood Farm. The killer was not a hitchhiker or a stranger passing through. He was a local man, a familiar face at the pub, who went on to commit 2 more murders after initially being cleared. Thank you for watching. Right then, take care, and I'll see you next time with another story that will make you say, "Well, I never."